Hello and welcome to another Retail Wire Roundtable. I'm super excited to be here today because we're talking about an important topic, and it's always important, but this is one I think people don't like to talk about as much because, it's some serious stuff, and retail security has become a major concern, and, connected stores is maybe a promise of getting us through this issue. But for today's roundtable, I brought together 7 experts in the field, and they know a lot more than me about this. So we're going to start going around the room, just give a 20-second about who you are, and then we can dive into the topic. Let's start with Gary.
Okay, thanks, Jace. So my name's Gary Sankry. I'm about a 40-year veteran in retail, 30 at Target and 10 the last 10 here at Esri. And just if you haven't heard of us, we're a geospatial mapping company. I'm helping folks here to see patterns in data and understand how those patterns can expose some of the things we're going to talk about today, especially in the ORC and fraud space.
Thank you. And Verlin?
Yeah, Verlin Youd with Strategic Startup Advisors. I've been in retail tech 30 plus years, big tech, small tech, and now spend my time advising companies who are trying to make their solutions relevant to retail and helping them understand what kind of value they can bring to retail clients and helping them get there.
We're just going around the top row and then we'll go bottom. So Franklin.
Hello, everybody. I'm Frank Margolis from Raleigh, North Carolina. I spent 25 years in the retail and retail tech space, doing a little bit of everything, including being a district manager and senior buyer at Walmart, helping Lenovo launch their first suite of IoT solutions for retail, and leading product marketing and pre-sales for Toshiba's retail technology division. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. And Reed Hayes.
Reed Hayes, LPRC for 25 years, University of Florida also for 24 years, a lot of retail and some law enforcement experience.
Pam, you'll be next.
All right. Hi, my name is Pam Kaplan. I spent 20 years at LVMH and Richemont, mostly with Fendi and Chloe. I have spent the last 5 years now consulting and advising, most recently part of AG1 launching their latest iteration last year. Excited to be here.
Excited you're here, Brand.
Yep. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Brand Elverston. Reader's Digest version is 22 years at Walmart Corporate in the risk mitigation asset protection space, and since 2017 in the independent advisory spaces, because I hate the word consulting.
Nolan Wheeler with Sync, came from Safeway, Albertsons, Loblaws, and Best Buy, store ops and LP roles, and founded Sync. And Sync is the connectivity part of this conversation with all this asset protection that's going on in stores. How do we find associates? And also just looking at the labor economics of how much margin pressure do we have when we have to converse with an associate to make these transactions happen in a lot of these categories.
We've got quite the panel. The main problems we'll focus on this call will be organized retail crime, fraud of many kinds, the balance of customer service. We're locking up products, but also there's kind of that customer service, customer experience. Violence in stores, that's a topic we don't talk about very much. And then this promise of technology, where technology can help or where it falls short, and what that future might look like. And I'm just opening up the floor to anyone to jump in here. Who wants to kick us off?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to start with violence, but we work with 167 retail chains now at this point. We do measure ourselves as well as do research with the National Retail Federation, NRF. And the consensus is that aggression and violence is still increasing, particularly in certain markets. And it's one of the leading discussions you'll hear in spikes from the C-suite people at retail corporations. So we can get into more definition later, but I think that it is for real. It's caused, in large part anyway, retailers to leave certain markets that may or may not have been lucrative for them because they couldn't get employees to come to work anymore, or enough employees to come to work, and certainly creates fear among customers as well as the staff. So that's
Yeah.
kind of initial salvo.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree with Reed. You know, in all my 3 decades now in retail, safety was always one of the top 3 priorities. Shrink, safety, but until the last couple of years, it was never number one. And if you talk to any of the tier 1 VPs in that silo, it's exactly what you just said, Reed. It's the safety, it's the alarming aggression and amplified risk that is now presented when we try, store associates try and do the right thing and intervene or mitigate that risk. So it's clearly exponentially a much greater risk aside from all the financial risk with shrink that's been around since dirt. And that goes up and down like a rodeo, but the violence is number one across tier 1.
You know, if you guys get a chance to see with Reed, he's done some really remarkable stuff in terms of assessing risk. And, they've got crime maps that kind of show all of the crime generators in the community. They show which stores might be at higher risk. And Brand, when you talk about sort of mitigating and, because a lot of it's like, well, what do we do? What do we do? And I think really trying to see those patterns and assess which stores are, you're going to take different actions at different stores. And I think we're going to get into that on the locking product up. But if you get a chance, it's a really remarkable set of maps, I think, that can help retailers understand where there's the biggest risk, or where these things, what stores do they need more preventative measures, where it's officers or whatever it might be.
Yeah, part of what I've heard in the market is this is exacerbated by the fact that retailers are trying to get as efficient as they can in the store. In other words, cutting labor hours and cutting the number of personnel available. So you have all of these outside influences, and then you now have a skeleton crew inside the store that feels less connected, less helped, less supported than ever before. And so it obviously creates that fear and the challenge in terms of hiring and retaining good employees as well.
You're exactly right, Verlin. I think back 15 years ago when I was running stores, we had our good stores, we had our bad stores. The bad stores, you hire a police officer for $30 an hour, in the evenings. Not very cost effective, not beneficial to the bottom line, but I still don't think it's a better solution than that. Even now, 15 years later, you still have armed guards at the store. I see them at 6:30 in the morning at my local grocery store when I go in at the gym.
Yeah.
It seems a bit silly to me, a bit extreme.
Yeah.
There's 8 people in the store, but it is what it is.
I'll play devil's advocate and just say
Please.
that all of that is affecting customer service. I don't know at the end of the day how much benefit we're getting when everything is getting locked up and there's no service on the floor.
Well, and there's a saying in retail. The saying is the best way to deal with this challenge in the store is through customer engagement.
Mm-hmm.
The
Exactly
more
right,
proactive
Verlin.
customer engagement you have, the lower this problem becomes. It doesn't disappear because there are organized crime and others who are doing it despite engagement. But engagement now, whether with humans or in some cases engagement with technology, which Nolan can talk to at great length, actually helps the situation as well.
And I want to do a quick adder, if I could do a quick adder to your comment about locking things up. At the end of the day, retailers, that store, those employees, the organization, they're crime victims, right? They are victims of crime. And when any of us are crime victims, when we're victimized or highly concerned about being victimized, we're now presented with a set of options, and none of them are great. In fact, most of them are bad. They're expensive. They create incredible friction, like you're talking about. But no retailer, in my mind, or to our knowledge, wants to adopt and deploy these countermeasures, but they're crime victims, and so they believe, and they can show they need to deploy these.
I mean, there's really good studies out there showing how much sales are depressed when you put these measures in place, and it's in the double digits. I don't want to directly quote, but it depends on who you talk to. And I think too, to kind of pivot, the ORC phenomenon that we've seen in the last 10 years or so is a big contributor, because the people coming into the stores are also more aggressive than they've been in the past. It's not, the teenagers stealing a piece of makeup. This is people taking entire shelves worth of stuff to boost it later. And I think that dynamic of the criminal versus the AP team has changed.
I think
Absolutely.
to Reed's point there, we're closing stores in certain markets. We're also just like, there's a consideration of, do we just get out of some of these categories? Like, are there DIY groups that just say, we're going to stop selling this category, or we're going to be in the healthcare segment, we're going to say, we're going to stop selling this category? We're really training a lot of our consumers to think about, these are just now de facto online purchases because the in-store friction is so bad. So it really just comes down to the technology in the store has to be that much better than Amazon and the immediacy of getting it today.
Yeah, I was going to say Amazon thanks you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want to lose the point that was talked about earlier in terms of violent individuals coming into stores. Over the last several years, I've talked to plenty of retailers who have a concern that they don't speak about too often about individuals coming into the store who present some kind of danger to both customers and employees. And that could be because of a homeless issue. It could be because of a mental illness issue. But there is a strong cry and demand for how people deal with threats, actual physical threats to retail employees from those kinds of risks.
Yeah, and then I would just add to my earlier point where devil's advocate on having more customer service. It's also the training. It's the training that we're giving to employees and making sure that they're staying safe. I feel like, unfortunately today, things like that we don't spend enough money or time on.
But I think it's important too. I mean, stores are still the number one touch point for the consumer, and our revenue is still store driven. There's a lot of, when we talk about technology, thinking about all the different sensors that can be deployed in the store, all of them give it, I think now more than ever, we talk about with Titleist connected stores, all the data that we're able to collect, we can set up somewhat of an early warning system, or at least be better prepared, I think, than we have in the past, to not only understand just based on where the stores are what might be happening, but if with an LRP, if a bad actor, a known bad actor, turns up in a parking lot, or somebody walks into the store, we have a better chance today of identifying them early on. And Pam, to your point, from a training, and even just walking up and oh, hello, Ed. Is there anything I can help you find? And right away, they know they've been identified. The risk factor for them to offend goes.
It's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent. It absolutely is a deterrent.
Well, I have a question about that. Nowadays, with stores worried about inherent liability, the associates are taught, don't stop somebody that is doing something suspicious. Don't get in their way. 15 years ago, you could physically say, no, you're not walking through this door. I don't think you paid for that. Now, customers walk right around them. So is it training, or is it just how they do their job day to day now that's actually limiting their ability to keep the store safe?
Well, my point is before they offend, once they have the stuff, if they're heading to the door, that risk factor for the employee and for the asset protection team is much higher. And that's where I think most retailers say, don't intervene at that point. It's not worth getting hurt. And actually, I think law enforcement prefers to interdict on your behalf. They want them out in the parking lot, away from your customers, away from the store. And also, if they can get them at the car, there's a very good chance they're going to find some more evidence that they can use to, when they go to gather evidence to build a case. A little over my skis. I see Reed's moving around, so I'm sure this is right.
No, I agree with everything you're saying. And Brand, what's your perspective on this as well, right? That, we've got to do something. You're a victim, a crime victim. It interferes with what everybody and anybody wants to do in retailing. But what are some of your thoughts, Brand? I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, on the risk, the physical risk of actually bodily injury or death. It used to aggravate me during COVID and the pandemic when I'd see these people saying, well, you fired that person because they attempted to stop them and they got shot. That's what they should be. I'm like, in all my 20 odd years at Walmart, never were we asked to risk injury. And there were people that pushed back on that. What do you mean? That's my job. And, if you're a 20-year-old kid, with, fresh dose of testosterone and really want to tackle the guy and have all the cops videos and all that associated with it. But retailers are doing absolutely the right thing, is the de-escalation and backing off. And we see a video read within the last 10 days or so in the Walmart store where the perp pulled out a gun. There was a cop in the room. The AP guy tackled him. And there was a brief hint that Walmart was going to terminate that person for tackling the guy and keeping the police officer from being shot. But they quickly backed off that. But I've never understood the logic of physical altercation and getting into a brawl in the vestibule, because rarely all of us that have retail experiences can always go back to instances where people were killed, and for what?
Exactly.
So I'd rather take the shrink hit than do a family notification over a TV. It just doesn't make
And
sense.
that's the concern, even about early warnings. If you know a bad actor is walking in, I hate to ask a store manager, or worse yet, a non-management employee to engage someone who's a known offender. To Franklin's point, there's some liability that goes along with that if you're asking them to do that. So it's maybe just putting in their ear with technology advice that says, take cover now, right? And just get out of the way.
Yeah, that's what that software Theatro does, right? I think one, if it detects somebody, the employees could be alerted, but they have instructions they could ask, or it can say, hey, here's what you do, 1, 2, 3, but also could notify the corporate office if you've got a security operations center or something like that. Because you don't expect that store to handle you, but you do need people to know about it.
I was going to say, I think there's some responsibility also on the corporation. As we know that there are stores that have higher risk, additional money needs to be spent to keep the employees safe. So it could be more cameras, it could be security guards, it could be very expensive, but I think at the end of the day, that's what needs to be done.
Well, they do. They apportion, and again, Brand would know this, of course, but and you guys in retail, but they do apportion by risk level, based on past incidents, based on risky places, or you heard Gary use the term crime generators that are around you. So they try and do that, but there's not a ton of evidence about what works really well. We've done 30 experiments, big experiments, but there are probably 300 things that we should test, right? We're a tiny team. But you're right, instead of just throwing things at it, what really shows that it works, we don't give everybody anthrax vaccination because, 30 people in a Washington, D.C. post office got infected. But there is apportionment. I think you made a fair point by anticipated risk level, but it's tough. You're a crime victim and you're playing defense.
Well, I think the refresh, if you will, on duty of care. So decades ago in Walmart, duty of care raised its ugly head when we were doing parking lot patrols. And then you have some, mail order lawyer that you didn't do it in this store, but you did it in the store down the street. So therefore, you're much more liable. I think with the advent of a lot of really creative, innovative technologies, computer vision, RFID, preventive active shooter software, that duty of care, I think, is going to become, maybe Franklin can speak to this, a center stage issue now, that so many solutions are out there to mitigate against risk. Why did you not do that? And so I'm hoping that will be the catalyst to change and adoption more quickly and aggressively of some of these innovative technologies. But I don't know, Franklin, you have a thought on that from your experiences, duty of care?
Yes, I do. I think the inherent challenge beyond the technological costs is the fact that it's going to involve retailers working with their competitors, sharing information between different stores, because it's not only happening at Walmart, certainly at Target, it's happening at every store. So someone's got to create essentially a consolidated database that everyone's feeding information into, possibly including local law enforcement, maybe even the FBI if it's crossing state lines. And so now we're having to manage an extreme amount of PII, again, without this person's even consent for it to be in the database in the first place. Make sure it's monitored securely. Presumably it's got to be in the cloud, because it's going to be funneled down to thousands of locations in near real time. I want to have dozens of cameras per store trying to recognize this person. Before they do something, they can be in and out in a few minutes. So I think the skeleton is there, but I think the actual application of it is still probably 5, if not 10 years down the road.
Agreed.
That's an excellent point, and if we talk about like ORC, for example, having that data, this is the only way you're going to be able to do any kind of entity resolution against it. So to be able to figure out that these events are connected. These ORC operators are all hitting the stores, and we have stores that are treating these as individual events, not realizing that this is a crew, or this is an organizing. And if you really want to, from a prosecutorial standpoint, understand that these guys are, and they're smart. They're using different cars, they're using different, so it might be different variables in different situations, but being able to link those all together from a geography standpoint, from a modus operandi, from all the different things that they're doing is how you can, and communicating that again with your partners in the shopping center that you're at, with your other retailers, and also with law enforcement is how you're going to get to that state and federal level enforcement. You've got to, otherwise you just don't have enough there to bring a case, and they're gonna think it's just another shoplift.
And Gary, this is just so tremendously underreported, right? Like, I mean, in terms of,
Absolutely.
Brand making some comments about, image recognition and understanding how many more events are going out there that are not being reported. And that reporting concept is onerous, right? Regardless of what the platform is. So how do we leverage video? We do a lot of stuff with radio traffic, because that's one of the most common things discussed over radios. Verlin, you know this from your theatro experiences. I mean, a tremendous amount of radio traffic is just talking about suspicious activities or challenges or empty packages or whatever the case may be. So, I think a lot of this comes down to more, how do we leverage AI and technologies to take voice and start to create some auto-generated reportings or some understandings of what the reality of the stores are, getting it back to the ivory tower.
I heard, I was at the LPRC kickoff last week. Great event. And one of the things that I hadn't thought about that Reed and the team mentioned was they just did the blitz. And Reed, you can speak more to it, but just getting people on the same frequency, which they were kind of hesitant to do that with the radio devices, was actually a bit of a game changer.
Yeah, we did. So we have an area that's got about 35 of our member stores in it, Butler Center, and Butler is the most traffic center in the state of Florida in the Southeast, and I think in the top 10 in the nation, believe it or not. But that's an area we're trying to do what some of you all are alluding to, right? Where how do we connect these people? Connect one is smart and connected place. How's that place? Connect two for us is enterprise, right? Smart and connected enterprise between your own stores. And then three is with a smart connect community, right? Now it's your neighbors and your protectors, your guardians, your law enforcement officers or agencies. So that's what we're doing, and that's what Gary's alluding to. But you have routine activities. How do you share, develop trusted partners, and then have very conditional sharing? With this guy, I can't share anything. I just don't trust him. This guy will share this under this situation, and so on, right? They're conditional sharing. And then during emergent or special operations. So if we have an active shooter or a looting and burning situation, a protest, or what Gary's saying, a special operation like a blitz. 17 retailers have their investigators there, and then you had 3 agencies. It was highly coordinated, but they weren't allowed to use the radios before. The agency said, no, we don't. This time we did. And so we handed out Motorola TLK radios to all 17 retailers. Now they can immediately communicate with each other and with law enforcement. So it was a total game changer. It was safer and much more productive.
It's fascinating, Reed. The radio still seems to be like the tool of choice with this trade, right? I mean, it's just, we got lots of smart devices out there, but man, those radios are like the most effective, safest way to go. And that's fascinating to hear about that frequency agreement.
Yeah, you just push a button at your mouth, right? You're not open the app. You're not having to look. You just do it. And it's intuitive. It's instinctive. And so I think it's a fantastic way to keep going with the radio communications.
Yeah, I don't want to be the cynic here, but the challenge is with radio, there's lots of ways to interfere with radio. And
No
so
doubt.
as soon as the organized crime guys figure it out, they can figure out a way to jam it or interfere or listen in at a very least and know what's going on.
Well, real quick on that, that's because that's a huge point. And Brand knows this. He's not only was former military, but worked a lot with defense guys that were working on things. So there's a company, Redcom, right? And they do highly, highly secure communications for NATO, for the U.S. Army, and so on. Well, they're here now. And so we are actually working on making radio communications more reliable and more secure and more resilient, right? So that's a huge point.
Well, and that's where people like Nolan at Sync and others, including Theatro, are working on very secure ways of being able to not only communicate, like you said, phase 1 inside the store, phase 2 across all their stores, but phase 3 open up and maybe use some intelligence AI to understand when to open the channel to the retailer next door or down the plaza from where you are.
So
Perfect.
does that also imply that you need another person there who's listening to the radio to make sure that, you don't know what's going to come across. So someone has to be there listening, waiting for something to be relevant to them.
No, and that's another great point, because if you have something, I'm not here to tell anybody like Theatro, but if you got it, you're always using it. You're talking to you Connect One if you've got more than one employee, but you could use that to connect with your neighbors, right? Hey, there's a guy with a knife running across the parking lot. He's wearing a green hat, but that's another important point, and it's totally different. If you've got a Walmart full of employees, or you've got a Five Below with 1.5 employees or whatever, that those are different dynamics. So all of these things, there's a lot of R&D going on.
Read at the at NRF just now, Zebra, who you could imagine kind of looks at radios as being a competitor. They actually launched and showed a push to talk, so PTT transmission off of Zebra devices to radios and radios back. So you talk about like security, you're talking about like a secure, RTSP stream from a Zebra device hitting radios. Like this is really becoming very topical.
No, that's very cool. I did not know about that.
I wanted to
I
jump
think
in.
the more seamless you make it, the more helpful it would be.
Yeah.
So it sounds like organized crime requires an organized response to the crime. And one of the advantages of Retail Wire is we can speak about these things. We're not under like a PR, you have to say the right thing. And as you notice on this call, we have consultants and those who can speak. But I always keep in mind that, we have retailers who listen in but can't speak. So we kind of are the voice for those, especially topics like this and anything with security, IT, where they're not allowed to speak on it. From your experiences with retailers, are these the top, like how do they speak about it? What are the top concerns in their own words when it comes to organized retail crime and fraud?
I'm glad you mentioned fraud. Go ahead. Somebody had a comment.
Yeah, I think
there's fraud within the organized crime.
Yes,
right.
That's right.
Yeah, the underpinnings, Chase, that the conversation you'll have in the one-on-ones is item level visibility to what is actually happening. So the symptom of those problems is the ORC, the guy running out the door with the TV. You see all that, you understand it's theft. But if you peel the onion back, it's no retailer you can go to and say, what is your percentage of your sales on the iPhone 17 that is shrink definitively? And it gets, and I see a lot of heads nodding, it's very sloppy, very opaque. And what that leads us to do, and that was my role at Walmart, we would do those estimations. They were sophisticated, but at the end of the day, it was an estimation. So when you start doing averages on averages on averages, you start diluting the impact of what it is you're trying to do. And I think we experienced a lot of that during COVID is, my shrink was $3 million in this store. The mistake is to mischaracterize that. Well, shit, sorry, they stole it all. And so let's lock it all up. And you have a store you walk in that looks like, they're in the wrong neighborhood. So I'll go back to, a very wise investment. If I were in the driver's seat on a W-2 and I only had a check for two things, it'd be computer vision and RFID, because we have to get visibility down to item level of what is happening. Did the store never receive it? Did we get double billed? Did we screw up a claim? Are we doing fraudulent refunds? How much of it is ORC? Remember the little debacle we had with the Senate hearing 2 or 3 years ago, grossly overestimating the financial impact of ORC. So Chase, I think in the industry, at least in the tier ones, item level visibility to what and how it's happening is a real hindrance.
I think it's a very good point.
You're saying diagnose before you treat, I think is what you said, right?
Yep.
Aim before you fire.
Exactly.
So that's it. We need more diagnostics. And those two tools do that. I'm sorry, somebody else, you had a comment.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's one more diagnostic tool, and that's because all of the things that you're describing, Brand, I think they're all leaving a data trail, right? And every time people are coming in, we've known that forever, but being able also to have some higher level aggregation to pull that data together to make those connections. I think that's really important in that discussion.
100%.
It's true. There's a big challenge to understand. It's at store level, right? And so you can't make a sweeping assumption across the company, but I think that with a lack of data, that's probably what is happening.
Yes, overestimation. And
I think this also needs to come back to the impact to the consumer, right? So we're talking about computer vision and all of this data. Privacy is going to come into that, how we guard that privacy, how we deal with the privacy, how we share, like someone said earlier, PII. But just from a sheer simple consumer point of view, how do you enable consumers to still have a low friction experience in your environment with all of these different solutions being deployed
100%.
is critical.
I would also say that you need the support of the team in the store. And right now their highest priority is selling. But if you made security also part of their role, that could also help increase the transparency as to what is happening.
The best idea I've heard in terms of how this can be solved and minimizing the friction, as you said, Berlin, is what if there was a program like TSA PreCheck in stores? So if you are a known customer and you have your loyalty card, they have some of your PII on file, you come in once a week, guess what? You're deemed more trustworthy than Chase. We've never seen Chase before. He looks a little suspicious. We're going to keep our eye on him. And now we add in a level of cameras. Great. Now that locked case of razor blades unlocks for you because we know who you are. Now when you're at the self-checkout, you have a reduced security setting, so you have to rescan and rebag 2 or 3 times at your checkout. I think that's the future. How we get there, I'm not exactly sure. That's what I think.
I agree.
I think it's easier than we may think. Everyone has a loyalty program. I belong to a loyalty program. I just bought a new car last week. I literally walk past my car with my phone in my pocket. It knows I'm there and it unlocks and sets all the settings that I like as I walk past. Well, that technology could certainly be used in locked cases where I walk into the toothpaste aisle and I should be able to pick up my toothpaste of choice without having a door unlocked.
Well, I want to just react because I think the one thing that we don't really talk about in these forums, and I think, Franklin, this speaks to your known traveler shopper, is a huge portion of this is insider theft as well, and we haven't discussed that. We have our
That's
own
a great point,
right? So it's not just a guest or a customer thing. There's a whole population of people that interact with our products and merchandise, and a certain percent are bad actors, and we need to understand why things happen where they do if we're going to be able to prevent it in the future.
You're exactly right, Gary. And I'm actually going to tie it into Brand's point. If you take out the paper shrink of the products that never even arrive at the store in the first place, that's probably 30-40% right there. Throw in the employee theft that's going out the back door. I mean, realistically, we're talking about, consumer theft is probably only 20-30% of the total shrinkage of most.
I've argued till I'm blue. As a former buyer, the shrink number needs to be split apart. I mean, this idea that my spoilage in grocery and my spillage over in the home chemicals and theft are all under one number makes it impossible for me to get to the bottom.
Right. And again, if you have a really strong team in your store, they should really know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I think
with today's data and with go ahead, Brant. Sorry.
We've discovered, and this is in a one-on-one conversation with a major retailer executive confidentially, tracking inventory levels. So those of us in retail, we always, did the, correlation is not causation. I get it. But as inventory levels increase, so too mysteriously did the shrink levels. And when we got inventory under control and pricing discipline, if you inventory at retail versus cost, they started to flatline. So in that conversation with that retail exec, I was complimenting them on a dramatic reduction in shrink. And I'm like, as well as I do, the thieves didn't wake up all of a sudden and find religion. So how did you do this? And he said, Brand, it's got way more to do with inventory discipline, which was absolutely out of control during the pandemic by reasons nobody could really control. He said, now with the long tail of inventory, we're getting that under control. We are not just in time, of course, but their shrink levels start flatlining. And that's true across the, Reed can speak to this. All retailers are sharing very positive shrink results with very few exceptions. So again, back to the visibility point, we can treat the symptoms of what we think, the survivorship bias, on what we see, the ORC, the smash and grabs, the thefts, the internals, all that stuff. But it's an incomplete picture until we get to item level visibility and we find out, Gary, that holy crap, P&G double billed me on that $300 million PO on toothpaste, and nobody caught it, which, believe it or not, still happens. So we're reacting with an incomplete picture is the easiest way to say that. And it's just where we are.
Agree.
Did Reed
Could
quit
be a
on us?
bias.
Or?
I don't know if Reed is still there, but I've noticed this, that you have the technology side, and there may be a bias toward, we have a technology, let's use it, without looking at, is it the right solution? And Brand, that was a very good point about, do you know what the problem really is? And it sounds like even from Gary's experience, just if shrink is all one bundle of things, including the orange juice spills, then you don't really have the information you need to make a decision, or to lock products up, or to make a sweeping change.
And the retail leadership today, we're in a very different place today, where we have numerous innovative technologies to mitigate risk that back in the day, and I see a couple of gray hairs there, we didn't have those options back in the day. It was lock it up or put an EAS tag on it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
the
tackle
interesting thing is, this is a problem. What the problems that you're noting and mentioning have been around forever, but yet those are not getting solved.
That's right. Because a lot of it is we simply don't know. If you're still, I used to say this to the asset protection guys, and it would aggravate some. I'm like, one of two things is true. If your shrink persists in a given store, one of two things is true. You're either not good at your job, or theft isn't the whole problem. Something isn't right.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to be a little provocative here and say we can talk all the tech solutions we want, but to Pam's point earlier, if you train your team correctly and you have the right team in the store, a significant
100%.
portion of this is going to go away regardless of the tech you put in place.
100%. All right, Chase.
No, honestly, you have to do training, because there is no cost-effective solution right now for proper inventory management, for, acknowledging and identifying that, provocative behavior. I mean, back at Lenovo, I analyzed 7 different ways to do inventory in stock, and none of them produce a positive ROI that we thought would actually help the store employees be more efficient in their jobs, actually help cut down on shrink. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if something shows in stock, on your Zebra device, it could be in 7 or 8 different places in the store. Not just where the modular says it should be. It can be on an end cap. It can be on the sale rack. I mean, it can be in someone's cart. It can be on the truck arriving that day. So,
right, it could be in transit.
It has to be, it has to be training, because we don't have a good cost-effective solution right now.
Well, and an engaged team is going to be less subject to internal shrink temptations and issues as well. And so I know retailers are spending less and less on training than ever before. There are less kind of retail management programs that have ever been before. But if retailers focused on those team dynamics within the store, leadership and team building, it would go a long way here.
Exactly. And a lot of times you don't see enough people on the floor.
Sure.
Very good point. Anemic staffing is a facilitator to theft opportunity. No question.
100%.
I really like your comment, Brand, about the inventory integrity, right? Like you're talking about lowering inventory in terms of the integrity of the buying side, but also I know you're a big advocate of RFID. The more we can get data on the real on hands, and then with disciplines around inventory, what that cycle counting process is, like the ability to do those cycle counts easy. I don't know if you guys have ever cycle counted a lock and showcase, but it's brain damage, I can promise you. So, the more that kind of comes into the data of what's the reality in the store, real time, is critical.
And that kind of goes into the connected stores aspect. We've talked a lot about solutions and technology that can help, or that really falls short, as Pam led us all the way back to training and people. When it comes to the promise of technology or connected stores, we heard RFID, we heard, was it computer vision?
Yeah.
But what are those essential pieces do you think would define the next 5 years of store operation?
Well, I think one of the key pieces that has been mentioned as well is connectivity in terms of communications within, between stores, and across an enterprise. And so I think if you're going to have that anemic staffing, if you're going to have those efficient models, then at least you have to invest in allowing the people that you do have on staff to communicate more effectively, easier, with less friction, and help each other out.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, really, technology, we have to shorten the lag time between the data collection and when we're actually able to use that data, both from, I mean, that's going to be your inventory problem in a big way. So,
and you think it's RFID that's going to solve that?
I think it's one of them.
Yeah.
I love the communication comment, Berlin. It's you and I's passion, right? Zebra doing that PTT integration with existing radios, I think is brilliant. I think leveraging AI to take those conversations and create prompts or create little registries, report writing and reporting instances is very labor intensive, and a lot of times is the bottom of like the list of to-dos from an operational perspective, right? It gets missed at that closing procedure because you want to go home, you want to get out of there, you're dealing with a late truck or whatever, it falls to the bottom of the list. So that communication piece and leveraging the transcription data of all that voice is I think a really awesome advancement.
Yeah, the e-commerce, if anything, fanned the flames on RFID adoption. It was e-com and the dependencies. So during COVID, everybody goes, they're not going to the store, buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, whatever. And the frustration of substitutions when Gary orders something and it says, yes, that store has it. And you get there to pick it up and like, oh, hey, no, we don't, but here's something else. And so RFID is moved itself up from, something that's really cool to a competitive imperative that you have to have predictability in your inventory or you're not going to be able to play effectively in e-com sales. And Walmart's done it really well. Target is doing well with it, but that has accelerated that adoption with the byproduct of inventory visibility and figuring out what is the theft problem. Or
and
what is the shrink problem?
I would ask, how expensive is it to adopt RFID?
It's not cheap. But if you put pen to paper and figure out the ROI and you include the ROI component of inventory visibility and figuring out what your theft really is, it turns into real money real quick. But
so that has to be the priority. A company has to really want to know.
I'd suggest also we need to get better with it. We need the technology to help us get better at the modeling and forecasting as well. So, I mean, all of this tech that we're talking about, it's collecting data, but it's not connecting the dots, right? We have to, right now we're doing that, but we need the technology. Again, all of these things happen in a place for a specific reason. And if you can take that disparate data and analyze it and build some kind of models and forecasts to say this is happening here, this is happening here, that's how you're going to be able to get proactive about solving these issues.
I think I was at NRF last week, and as many of you were, and everyone's talking about AI, but I didn't hear anyone talking about the point you just made, Gary, which is stitch all of these various data sources together to understand inventory reliability, and then translate that into what you're doing with shrink and security in this particular problem.
Great point.
Again, it's focusing people on what the problem is and really committing to finding the solution.
Yeah.
Get to the so what. That's right.
We're coming up to the end of the time. We have about a minute and a half or a minute. Final thoughts, final takeaways. Like I said, retailers lurk around because they can't really speak for themselves on this stuff publicly. Any takeaways or any thoughts to leave us with?
The only thing I would say quickly is the solution set available to retail leadership today has never been more abundant. We just got to amp up and be a little bit more aggressive and invest in these innovative technologies and do it. It's a choice to have your store with everything locked up. That is a choice now. It's not an imperative like it used to be.
My summary would be anything you could do with technology, again, to support that store team and help them do what they need to do better should be your first priority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say everything we've talked about today, the fraud, safety, theft, ORC, really the same foundational issue exists, which is you have to be able to look forward and link these events together to be able to understand what's happening, and that global view,
Correct.
and be able to share that externally.
Great
Yeah.
point, Gary.
We basically just talked about data, right? I mean, whether it's geographic data or inventory data or if it's voice traffic over radios, this is all just data. So it's a matter of amassing that data and then turning it into intelligence.
I support, I mean, locking up should be the last resort. I think it's the worst thing you can do in a store. And
Yep.
I completely support investing in employees training, but also taking the time to understand truly what the problems are and finding the solutions.
I mean, retail by definition is human activity. And whether that's the theft side, whether that's the stocking the shelf side. So as of right now, based upon cost, based on technical limitations, I think the best solution for all the stuff we discussed today is the people. Train them, make sure they stick around.
Agree.
Very insightful. Thank you all for sharing. Sad that Reed dropped off. Maybe he, I know he likes us, so it's not that. It must be the technology. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to everyone who watches this live or in on demand later. And we'll see you all on the next roundtable.
Great. All right. Thanks all.
Thanks.